Welcome. I'm Maureen Mooney. I'm the Attainment Advisor for Aberdeenshire, and I'm joined today by two Education Scotland colleagues, Janie Irvin and Sarah Elliott. Janie is our STEM woman, as I call her, a STEM contact, and Sarah is the Attainment Advisor for Murray. So we aim to explore situational poverty in Scotland, the specific effects of situational poverty, equality and equity, and I'm going to be spending a wee bit of time on that, implications for class teachers, and then ideas and actions to close the poverty-related attainment gap. Now, we know that that's no easy task. So that's what we'll be looking at, is what is situational poverty, because there are so many different types of poverty out there, and they've got quite specific or they manifest themselves in quite specific ways for different types of poverty. And today we're going to look at particularly situational poverty, and that I think will become or there'll be a rise in that as lockdown ends and we get the real impact of COVID, unfortunately. So the next slide, please. I'm going to aim to explore poverty in Scotland, the specific effects, as you can see there, equity, and that's what we'd already put in. To support that, those things there that we're going to be looking at, you can do your own reading. The Scottish Indices of Multiple Deprivation 2020 statistics have now been released. Now, the statistics that I've got in here aren't the up-to-date ones, because this has just come out. But there's an SIMD 2020 introductory booklet as well, and there's supporting materials. And if you go on to Statistics Scotland website, you can access that if you want to get real up-to-date information there. So next slide, please. So child poverty in Scotland. Now, child poverty is caused by a range of factors which work together and result in inadequate household resources, basically. Factors that contribute to insufficient income include low wages and underemployment. Now, not unemployment, but underemployment. So 65% of children in poverty were living in households with at least one adult in employment. So employment is by no means a guarantee or a route out of poverty. While there's an upward trend in terms of rates of employment in Scotland, changes to the quality and the type or the nature of the work have driven up in-work poverty or situational poverty. So it's the working poor, and it's things like 0-hour contracts, part-time work, seasonal or fixed-term work, and self-employed contracts, where that limits and sometimes doesn't allow any for pension, sick pay, or any kind of type of security. And there's inadequate security benefits. So despite being intended as a safety net against poverty, many families that get social security benefits are still living below the poverty line. Nearly 3/4 of households with children in which no one works experiences poverty. You'll no doubt have heard in the news that recent welfare reforms are a major contributing factor, if you like, to the dramatic increase in child poverty, which is projected for Scotland. It is already on the rise. There are figures out there that show it's on the rise. And the interaction of the factors, those factors that I'd mentioned there, mean that children in households with certain characteristics are at greater risk of experiencing poverty. So, for example, this is at UK level. Children living in households where someone is disabled, those kids have got a 36% increased risk of experiencing poverty. So you think about that in your class. Is there someone in your children's household disabled? Children living with a lone parent family are 49% at risk of experiencing poverty. And I'm sure if you think again about your kids, there's a lot of split families there. And children living in households where there are more than 2 children have a 42% risk of experiencing poverty. And you might be thinking, but we're teachers, you know, why is this our problem? And why, if you like, do we have to address this? Next slide, please, Janie. So this is why. Okay, I'll just let you have a wee read at that. It's at the heart of Scotland's education policy, and it forms the foundation of our curriculum. Right, it's also embedded, and you'll know this well, in the GT standard for registration. We've all got registration. Some are returning teachers have full registration, some NQTs will be looking to gain full registration at the end of your NQT year. And you will know this, and we all have the professional skills and the abilities, otherwise we wouldn't be where we are now, together with the professional knowledge and understanding that we need to make a difference to the lives of the children that are in our care. And I do mean that. I mean, these kids are in our care. They're not just in our classrooms. But it's more than this. It lies at the heart of our professional values. That's why I've put that in red. It's our understanding and our belief that everyone deserves a fair chance, and that some may need more help than others. But children in poverty deserve even more than this. They deserve a commitment. We need to give them a commitment to changing and improving their lives. That's what will make the biggest difference to these children. Next slide, please. And I think, Sarah, are you going to post in the chat the link? That, as you can see, really kind of pulls at the heartstrings. I think that really brings home what it is that we're asking you to be aware of, and really what it is we're asking you to do within your classrooms. I mean, those kids talk about that they speak about having someone to talk to, someone who cares. I mean, one girl talked about emotional poverty. And then there was the big guy with the red hair that says, we just want somebody to be loved, you know, somebody to love us. That's kind of what the kids really want, somebody to understand. And it probably does come across as a wee bit doom and gloom when you hear that film was made and the aim within the government was to eradicate child poverty by 2020. Well, we're in 2021 and it's worse than ever. And it is going to get worse again before it starts to get better. But the message I want you to take away from that is that it is not all doom and gloom. There are things that you can do to mitigate that poverty. There are things that you can do to help educate those children and to actually change the system that we've got. You can play a part in that, and I'll go through some of that. Before I do that, does anybody want to speak? Does anybody want to make a comment, ask anything, say anything? Because you've all been very quiet and I've been speaking. So anybody? Yeah, it was a UNICEF video made in 2012. Now, if that had been, if I'd said to you that was made, you know, in 2019, 2020, you would think, yeah. So really, that we need to be doing more. And I think that's why it is just such a privilege to be able to speak to newly qualified teachers and returning teachers. We need you people to bring energy and vitality into the profession and to keep the movement towards equity going. Any hands raised or anything, Sarah? Will I just move on?
No hands and no further comments, Mo. Happy to move on.
Okay, thank you. Sorry. Next slide then, please.
Sorry, Mo. We've got Miss Whitworth.
Right.
Saying, I think it's so important to highlight that it's not just those who are unemployed that may be suffering. So that goes back to your earlier point about in-work poverty.
Absolutely, thank you for that. It is really, I mean, there's generational poverty out there. I've had 2 or more generations of families who have not been in employment. And I think there's a better awareness of that in the education system. But the situational poverty, as I'll go into detail in a wee minute, people can go in and out of poverty, and then there's rural poverty, which is different again, and there's different stigma and things that go along with it. So you're absolutely right, and obviously I'm speaking to the converted because you people have signed up to find out more about this, so we're halfway there, so thank you. Next slide, Janie. So are we on it? Right, okay, good. So it's equality versus equity, if you like. So in your class, in your school, or in your classroom, what do you promote? Is it equality, or is it equity, or is it both? Next slide, please. I came across this when I was looking for graphics really around this, and it brought back to me when I was a relatively new teacher, and I had, you know, I thought I was doing my best to promote homework by, I suppose, if I'm really, really honest, putting pressure on the kids that didn't bring their homework. And then there was one time a wee boy was late from school, and I took him home. When chapped the door and it got opened, and there was, you know, 20 dogs ran out for a start. And when they opened it, there was floorboards, the wallpaper was peeled off the walls. You could see into one bedroom. There was no radiator. It was obviously a radiator meant to be on the wall. And all I could see in the corner of one bedroom was a mattress on the floor with a sheet. And there wasn't like a proper fitted sheet and all the bedding and stuff like that. And that really brought it home to me. And I thought, oh my God, I'm trying to put, I mean, my expectations are the same of him as the other kids in the class. And not only were my expectations the same, but I was actually putting pressure on him to do his homework when he was living in those conditions. And that's when we really need to remember as well that children living in poverty are less likely to experience early learning at home and less likely to value education. Now, it's important to say that not all situational poverty environments are like that, because it tends to be the working poor and they move in and out of the poverty. But I just wanted to I wanted a wee anecdote message to bring home the message about equity versus equality. You know, treating everybody in my class the same, expecting the same of all of them. You're putting pressure on them, but not putting in supports to make it equitable for the kids within my class at that time that weren't able to do their homework at home. So that's kind of just why that was there. Next slide, please. Again, that's quite another good one, I think. You know, are we giving everybody the same thing? If we give everybody the same, provide everybody with a bike, they can't all access it. So we have to tailor what we give them to ensure equality of access to education within your classroom. Next slide. I'll just let you have a wee minute to read that. And while you're reading through it, just have a wee think about the children that we've just been talking about. Children that are in situational poverty, rural poverty, and ones that will be in generational poverty within your class. Is it enough to be treating them all equally? Or by doing that, are you failing to meet your GTC standards? And more importantly to me, the moral imperative that you've got to improve the outcomes and the life chances for all the children and young people of Scotland. We need to do more on a day-to-day basis to close that poverty-related attainment gap. And that won't happen if we treat everybody equally. We need to ensure equity. Next slide, please. Okay, so situational poverty, I've put up there for anybody that wants to read more on that. That's the main sources that I've used in this PowerPoint. By no means limited, there's an abundance of poverty-related research out there, actually. Next slide, please. So Highlands and Islands research found that situational poverty has three main elements. That it could circumstances, and those could be divorce, illness, death in a family, business failure, a fire in the home, or displaced from the home. redundancy, cutbacks, or a new job away from home. Now, when you think of the effects of COVID on the economy, there's going to be there's a lot more divorce. We know that there's an increase in domestic abuse. There's illness. There will be death. Businesses are failing all over the place. Redundancy, cutbacks, and people having to take new jobs away from home. So that's going to be on the increase, I'm afraid. So situational poverty can obviously be monetary based, and you can see that from the circumstances, because many of these things kind of affect on the ability to work and bring in money, but the bills still have to be paid. The positive side about situational poverty is that it can be short-lived as opposed to generational poverty, and it often does not become generational poverty. So there is an upside to it. Next slide, please. So that's some of the characteristics of situational poverty. A lack of job or resources can affect family identity, and it can lead to heightened anxiety and or depression. Now, this can happen to the children too, so it doesn't just affect the adults. The lack of experience of not being able to pay bills or buy food or buy the basics can lead to a panic and a grieving for the life that they used to have, that the family used to have. There's often confusion over what bills to pay first, what to do next, how to access the system. It's often frightening new territory, and it can be extremely stressful for families. Families can experience a sense of loss related to self-efficacy and their place in society. They've often been brought up to value education and have a work ethic, and have played their part, if you like, as a valuable member of society. And then for some reason, that's all of a sudden been taken away. Often they're used to being self-sufficient and are much less likely to ask for help and more likely to try to keep up appearances. And as you can imagine, that adds to more stress within the family. All that stress, worry, tension and anxiety and lack in the home can lead to changes in behaviour. Many children find out, if you like, what's going on, or they find out some of it and they add the bits that they don't know for sure. This can result in them becoming withdrawn, can result in them acting out, getting involved in substance misuse, and they can often act out of character. And as we know from nurture principles, all behaviour is communication. If you, I just give you another wee story, if you like. I had a parent, and we knew when she was coming into school that if she didn't have her makeup on, then watch out, because it was going to be all hell at the office, and then I would get sent for, and it would be all hell, and you know, the school would be awful, the teachers would be awful, everything would be terrible. And other days she would come in, drop the kids off, she'd have her makeup on, and she'd good morning, and she'd be very, very nice. And we found out weeks and weeks later that the family business was basically going down the tubes. So that it was those changes in behaviour, because I used to think, what have we done? Nothing had happened to her wee one in school. There was nothing that we could make head nor sense of the changes in her behaviour, till we found out that obviously all this stress was happening at home, and often you're the one that gets it, if you like. Next slide, please. Okay. Shame. And there's a lot of shame attached to situational poverty. Feelings can be experienced by both the parents and the children, and again result in this high anxiety. It's the high levels of cortisol that can lead to changes in behaviour, and medical research has shown that it can actually impede cognitive ability. So if you're living in a highly anxious state, you're less likely to be able to think through things rationally. Children living with high cortisol levels can often fly off the handle, or explode for no reason, or overreact. Now, that's due to the toxic stress that they're experiencing because of the situation they're living in. And again, think about it. You've maybe come across this where, you know, you're talking to a child and you're talking to them about their piece of work, and you've praised it all and praised it all, and then you say something like, "Oh, you just remember to put your wee full stop in there," and they go nuts. I mean, I've had a wee one rip up the paper, throw their pencil. "I can't do this. I'm not doing this." But you've spent the best part of a minute telling them, you know, all the good points, and you've just mentioned one wee thing. That's because they are really at the end of their tether, if you like. They are so high on the anxiety level that they just can't handle one wee thing that they normally would have been able to handle. So stigma, or a perceived stigma, can be more acute in rural communities as well. So if you're in a wee village school, rural communities are more intimate, so poverty can actually feel more exposed. Next slide, please. So that's the kind of common factors, if you like, of poverty there, and that came from Heriot Watt University's university that did some research. So your kids living in poverty are more likely to have lower attainment, leave school earlier, be unemployed, display risky behaviours or offend, have parents that don't trust or engage with services, and have weight and health problems. And they are less likely to experience early learning at home or to value education. So if parents are, you know, really worried about their bills and they're stressed out, they're not really going to be able to do homework with the kids. You know, reading them a story at night, singing them songs, that'll probably go all by the wayside because they're just trying to cope with their day-to-day worries and concerns. So again, just bear that in mind when you're setting home tasks. Next slide, please. Before I move on to kind of what we mean about closing the gap, anybody want to say anything or ask anything? You're all very good. You're very well behaved and very quiet. Maybe that's because I've muted your mics. But please just unmute and come in if there's anything anybody wants to say, or put it in the chat.
Well, I popped something in the chat. It's Janie here.
Oh, Janie, right, okay.
Furlough, because I was thinking, you know, actually, there's so many people I know that I would have described as living just within their means. You know, they were used to spending, you know, by the end of the month they'd spent everything that they had, and you know, but by looking though, you might think that they seem to have all the nice.
They were well off.
The nice pencil pieces, the nice bits and pieces. They were well off, but actually they were living so close to within their means that any change of circumstance is going to massively impact. And I was just thinking, you know, that furlough about living on 80% of your wages. Well, if you normally spend 105% of your money every month, living on 80% is not going to do it.
Exactly. And most of us do live to our means, if you like. And there is research now. I don't take this as a fact, because I think it's roundabout. They say if you lose your job, the majority of people are only, is it 2 months away from, you know, not being able to maintain their mortgage or their rent. So most people don't have more than 2 months' bills, if you like, saved anywhere or access to it via credit cards. So 2 months is mainly what people's got. So it's really awful. And those people there, Janie, the ones that are then on that 80% wage, they will be experiencing those feelings possibly for the first time. If they've always managed to work and live within their means, all of a sudden, through no fault of their own, they can't pay bills. And that they don't know, it's new territory. They don't know how to cope with that and how to cope with those feelings of not being able to support their family. And look at the suicide rate has gone up massively. Again, I don't have the actual figures with me here, but there has been a large increase in that. And it's all kind of down to that. Anybody else got anything, Sarah, or will I move on?
We've got Liz, who was very much agreeing with the furlough system and the level of poverty, I think, that some families are now facing. And we have Armaine, I don't know your first name, but they've commented that furlough can have a big impact, especially on the higher earners, as 80% only covers up to a certain amount of people. So if people are earning above that but have big mortgages, this can have a big impact on them. And that
actually Absolutely. And quite often you kind of forget about those people. You know, you might not think of those children within your classroom as being in situational poverty because, you know, they've got the 2 cars, they've got the Mercedes, they've got the Porsche, they've got the big house, yes, but you're absolutely right. Along with that, they're more than likely to have all the big bills. And again, they're probably just a typical family that are living to their means. And the minute their wages are cut, and 80%, I think the furlough only does go up to a certain amount. So it's probably for some families, they might end up, they're getting 50% of their wages, you know, what they would normally get. So situational poverty can hit anybody, any social class at all. So it's quite a biggie.
Hand up as well, Mo.
Okay. Okay, Mrs. R, do you want to just... Hello.
Hi, it's Mrs. R.
Mrs. R.
It's Morag Robertson.
Hello.
Hiya. Yeah, and just I think especially, I mean, it's the numbers are going up anyway, but especially now, this is all, and a lot of this will be really hidden from us.
Yes. And do you know what, Morag? The families will work hard at keeping it hidden from you.
Yeah.
Because they'll feel that failures, the only one of the good things that came out when we were looking at the equity audit was, or I was finding certainly, and it was people were saying families are much more willing to say they're struggling because it's COVID related. So everybody knows it's out with their means. So there's families accessing food banks and clothing banks at schools that head teachers have said to me would never have shown face before. So in some ways, COVID might make it easier for families to ask you for help, or might make it easier if you want to approach a family to offer help because of COVID, because you can put an excuse in place for them.
Yeah, that I see what
and
you're
that
saying.
Makes it easier. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it's a very difficult thing to approach a family about that, to offer them, you know, I've been in that situation a number of times, to offer clothes for their kids or offer extra resources, or it's once you've done that, once you've had that initial conversation, it's much easier for them to speak to you, but that's a difficult thing to do. But as I say, lockdown might have helped with that. Okay, if there's nothing else, Sarah, will I move on to the next slide? I'm just conscious of time.
Nothing else at this end, thanks, Mo.
Okay, Janie, can we go on? The gaps there, you've read that. There's not really much for me to say about it. We know there's a gap. So the interesting thing that children living with low or the Joseph Rowntree Foundation noted that children living with low life satisfaction always highlighted that they were bad at reading. Now, often when you spoke to their teachers didn't necessarily agree with that, but that was their perception, that they were bad at reading. And the good thing about this is that research shows that reading interventions can close the poverty-related attainment gap by 30%. Now, so that's food for thought. You know, if you can do some reading intervention around there, that might help to close the gap. Whatever you do as an intervention to close the poverty-related attainment gap, research shows that it's got more of a chance of success if there are opportunities for family involvement and relationship building. And the Joseph Rowntree Foundation and Grown Up in Scotland research suggests that social relationships with parents, schools and friends are key to social and emotional well-being. So if there's something that you decide to do within your classroom about reading, you can make that even more effective if you invite parents in, or some link. I mean, you can't do it at the moment because schools are closed. I know that. I'm talking about when we're back to normal, if we are back to normal. But if there's some way, you know, if there's a wee activity, if, you know, I'm thinking about the paired reading. Could you do that with children? Can you get the child to be the teacher and read to the parent, and the parents to be the child and do the homework? A wee bit of fun things in there, activities in there that actually just build relationships. They can have a laugh, a wee bit of fun about it, and you're promoting reading at the same time. So it's just food for thought. Gus, in their 2016 research, takes that even further and suggests that whole family involvement may have a better chance of success and lead to greater improvements for the child. So the more members of the family you can get involved, again, the better chance of success that you've got. And it might be that, you know, the mum's in one house, the dad's in another. You could maybe involve grandparents, big brother, you know, if you've got older kids, if there's older kids in the school. I certainly used to do that. Used to get the older kids to read with their siblings. And then we'd send homework home for the adults, and the kids would mark it and have a good laugh at it, and had to give their parents feedback. It was just fun, but it just sparked that interest in reading. So the challenge, if you like, for us is to think of inventive ways that we can involve parents more in their children's learning. And I think in some ways, the online learning has maybe helped with that as well. Now, I know for some families it's made it harder and there's less engagement, but the research that certainly we've seen recently suggests that there's families engaging with schools remotely that would never have went near a school. So it's just, again, it's all food for thought. You need to think about your context and what you can do. And again, when things get back, when we ask them into school, is it tagged on at the start of a day or at the end of the day, so that there's not that extra expense of getting back to school? And it might only be a short 5-10 minute car journey, but if their petrol is, if they're watching every mile, then a double journey, they might think, no, I can't go, I can't afford it. Or if they have to get a bus, can't go, can't afford it. If you get them when they're dropping kids off, or when they're coming to school anyway to collect kids, offer incentives. You might want to call it bribes, in school we call it incentives. So things like cake, and again, that costs money, so that's down to the school budget. But it could be something that the child has made. And if you're doing something around reading, if the child even just, you know, draws or paints a picture about the story, about their reading book, and that's the thing that the parent can get to take away. It's been produced by the child, but they get to take it home. It's a wee incentive for them to come in. And when we are allowed in schools, is your school or your classroom a safe, non-threatening context? Now, some parents' experience of school might not have been a good one. They may have learning difficulties themselves, or suffer from some anxiety or mental health issue. So do we know these parents? Do we invite those particular parents into the classroom just for 5 minutes after school when all the other children have gone? You know, just to see where their child sits, to build that relationship. And more importantly, when you are talking with parents, if you think back to your interactions with parents, do we share the nice things, or is it only the bad? And for some kids and some families, you can't, with the best will in the world, a teacher can get into that almost a spiral where any interaction with a parent is not a good one. So parents dread it and they don't want to come in. Is there any way then that you can keep that? If it's discipline issues, keep that for school. Start to share the nice things, builds the self-esteem of the child, and it builds the relationships with the parents. Next slide, please. Okay, so that's just an idea of things that you can do. It's about creating an ethos of you can do it in your school or in your classroom. Do you put posters around your classroom or your school with positive messages? You can get loads of them. You just Google it, you get them on Facebook. I used to take screenshots, send them, email them into school, print them out in colour, get the kids to put them up in different places. It's that positive mindset. Incorporate positive mindset in health and wellbeing lessons. Now, I'm talking Dojo, Class Dojo has wee short clips, 2, 3, 5-minute clips. Nursery rhymes like Incy Wincy Spider, that promotes resilience. Do we point that out to the children? Do you use it in drama? You can make fun ideas. If you've got an older class and you're thinking, oh, I've got P5, I'm not going to teach them Incy Wincy Spider. But if you explain to them the message around resilience and ask them to do a wee drama sketch for showing to the primary ones, you're telling them it's for the primary ones, but the whole time you're reinforcing that message with them in a fun way that, again, they can build up these peer relationships. And research shows as well, children listen to other children. So you've got the kids delivering the message to younger kids, and just share it at assemblies. Just wee ideas. And again, look at the nurture principles. Teach your children about the nurture principles, even if you're not, your school's not going down the nurture school route. It doesn't matter. There's 6 principles that are really basic. Schools, and think back to the UNICEF thing that the kids were saying that they wanted. School's a safe place. Language is understood as a vital means of communication. So listen to the kids. All behaviour is communication. If they can't verbalise it and they're acting out, what is it that they're trying to tell you? It's not that they're a bad boy or a bad girl. It's that they're so stressed out, something's going on in their lives. What is it? Learning is developmental. So again, are you, and I'm sure you are, differentiating your lessons appropriate to the child's developmental level, to their need? And nurture is important for the development of self-esteem. A lot of kids might be experiencing, even if it is kind of temporary attachment issues, if their parents have suddenly become withdrawn. They're normally caring and attentive, but actually they're snappy, they've got no patience, they've not got time to read them a story, they're not taking them to clubs because the parents are suddenly find themselves in this situational poverty. Kids are going to feel that. So a relational or nurture approach is needed. We talk about transitions being important and significant in a kid's life. Now, we're not just talking about transition from, nursery to, or early years to primary 1 and P7 to secondary. We know about that and we've put a lot of work into it. But there's other transitions for kids. They could be transitioning to another house. They could be transitioning to parents being split. It could be experiencing loss. It could be a loss of their normal routine or their safety during the holidays, for example. Think of kids that I could rhyme off, kids that used to actually, their behaviour went off the wall when it was coming up to a holiday. They didn't want to be on holiday. They wanted the school to continue. They wanted that safe environment and safe routine. It could be a divorce or a death, or it could be a new school. They've moved to a new school. Anything is a transition for a child. So
well, just to give you a heads up, we're just approaching 25 past, and we're just
okay.
5 past 5.
Right, okay. So there's lots there that you can do. If you go on to the next slide, that's the role of adults. And I think that is really, really important that you be aware of that. And remember that 1 in 5 children in the UK will have experienced domestic abuse by the time they reach 18. This means that, all staff, including non-education staff, are there to support. You're in a unique position. You can support children because we know that domestic abuse is on the rise at the moment with lockdown, with people being contained and all the additional stresses. So it's there. That's your roles, if you like. Next slide, please. I'm not going to go through all of these. They are just ideas. Although they're whole school approaches, they are still something that you could be doing in your classroom, even if your school doesn't want to take them on as a whole school approach, or it could be something that you want to do as small scale research for your NQT year around one of these, and maybe leading it within your school. Again, another one of the good things that's come out of lockdown is it's really, really raised the focus of these things. And schools, your school will probably be glad of any support in taking some of these forward. Next slide, please. So again, if you're not a kind of data person and you're really, the data doesn't convince you, growing up in Scotland, found that the greatest resource or influence was the teacher. Of all the things that you can have, the thing that can influence a child's education or educational experience more is, within a classroom, of course, is the teacher. So I just wanted to also add some pictures of cute children so that after all this doom and gloom, you'll actually all go back to work. Next slide, please. And Sarah, I think if you put the link in the chat for people to access that.
That's it uploaded.
Thank you. If you just go to that, people, and it's only, I think it's a couple of minutes, and then just come back in. What I would say about that one is, well, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found it inspirational. I loved it, and I certainly wouldn't hesitate to let my kids see that, older kids. Just if you are talking about resilience and, and them being motivated in their own learning, show them things like that. If you are doing cost of the school day, or you are looking at poverty, again, if you've got older kids, show them the UNICEF video. These are things that they like, they like to see, rather than just a teacher telling them, kind of thing, I suppose. Okay, so that's me finished, folks, and I'm just at, look, 5:30, which is pretty good going for you. People that don't know me, I can talk for ages. If you don't mind, the next slide, Janie, has got the evaluation on it, and if you could take time, please, because we really do look at the evaluations, and we try our best to constantly improve our performance, if you like.